Welcome to Season 3 of Heart of the Gulch. On today's episode, we sit down with Andy Nelson, founder and head distiller at Nelson's Brier Distillery here in Nashville, Tennessee. In our Walk the Line episode, Andy gives us a behind-the-scenes look at a tour at Nelson's Brier, and we check out all the renovations they added to the distillery. Let's check out the episode. We are in the Heart of the Gulch. My name is Tony Mendoza, your host, and today we got someone, a friend of the Gulch, that's for sure. We have our guest, him and his brother, Charlie, in 2006, stumbled across their destiny in Brier, Tennessee, finding their old Nelson's Distillery, which is crazy. This is like, I swear to God, this sounds like a legend. And from there in 2023, you guys are now doing an amazing job at the distillery, putting out some amazing whiskeys, been featured in multi-magazines, like you know them, like Forbes. Today we are talking with the co-owner Andy Nelson from Nelson's Brier Distillery. What's going on?
Oh, not much, man. How are you?
Oh, dude, I need to shorten up the intros a little bit. They're a little long.
That's all right. I mean, you can cut them, right? I mean, it's like you give too much, you can cut a little bit out. It's better than not having enough.
On the intro, though, that's the only time where I have to run with it.
Yeah.
So, Andy, how are you doing, man?
Good. I'm doing well.
We were talking a little bit off camera about, your amazing podcast that you got going on and how much podcasting has kind of evolved. And I wanted to kind of talk on that story about your father. Your father was originally in the music industry, right?
Yeah, film industry. In movies. Yeah, he was a sound mixer on movies out in Hollywood for about 20 years. And
so you got to see all the equipment before, like real deal equipment.
Yeah, like 80s, like full production. I mean, real movies, not just like even indies or college films or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, he was a double Oscar nominee for that. So he was, in that real world.
Well, and then also we were talking about how you're originally from California.
Yeah, I was born out there. Okay. Because my dad actually was born and raised here in Nashville as well. So like our family, going back to the distillery history, I mean, my family has been here in Nashville since the 1850s. My dad included, born and raised out here, but then he went out to USC Film School after he graduated from college, undergrad, started working on movies out there. And so my brother and I were born out there, but we moved back here to Nashville in 1989. So I was 6 years old. Charlie was still 4, I guess.
Do you like, so I've noticed, I'm an older brother too. Yeah. And it's not, and my younger brother is called his name's Andy, believe it or not. And there's something about, and I hear you say it a bunch of times in these interviews that I've listened to, is that my younger brother, Charlie. Yeah. Do you honestly love that you can say he's your younger brother? Do you like that little, like, being the older brother, the older sibling?
I mean, I guess I do because, he and I have such interesting, like, different personalities, which is kind of why, we work well running the business together, is that we're brothers still. So we know that we have each other's sort of best interests at heart inherently. But our personalities are so different. Like, he is kind of the forward-facing one, and so and also, by the way, just physically, he has a big old beard, and he just looks older than I do. So everyone assumes that he's older, but I kind of relish that because, I'm definitely the older, wiser, better looking, everything like that. But everyone assumes that he's older. So,
well, that's what facial hair will do for you, right? Yeah. But it's at the end of the day. So you guys grew up here in the Tennessee area.
Yeah, right here in Nashville.
Right here in Nashville. So it's not every day I get to actually talk to a Nashvillian.
Yeah.
Especially with all the amazing guests that we've had. They're from all over, just like transplants are. But do you remember the original Nashville? Do you remember what it was like, growing up here in the city?
I mean, I remember my original Nashville, but of course mine is a little bit different than, someone who has lived here since the 50s or the 60s or whatever, like say my dad. that's the kind of Nashville that I've read about in history books, or ask my dad about. But yeah, absolutely. I remembered. I mean, I remember when 2nd Avenue downtown, to be honest, was like mostly peep shows and sex shops. And it was kind of this grimy little part of town. And then, in comes the Hard Rock Cafe. There was a Planet Hollywood downtown at one point in the 90s. So it was just a fundamentally different world. And so even seeing just 2nd Avenue evolve, that very specific little stretch, is really wild. Yeah.
Well, the only thing me relocating here in 2020, I got to see just, these buildings, these high rises, right? Not necessarily changing of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can compare it to is Austin. Because when I was growing up in the 90s, in the 90s and early 2000s, Austin wasn't what it is today. So I can only imagine. So I tried to, whenever I have someone who's a Nashvilleian sitting in this chair, my direct thing is I got to think about what Austin looked like back then.
Yeah.
And I heard that the Gulch area here in Nashville was a totally different monster.
Yeah. I mean, the word Gulch itself it describes a geographical feature, which is specifically like a kind of like a valley in which there's also a train station. So it truly back then was, as far as I remember, just kind of very much industrial, and there was nothing really commercial here. There. Yeah, it was weird.
I heard it was also in a way kind of a little dangerous too.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, everything changes, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's transition a little bit. So where did you go to high school here in Nashville?
That's kind of a trick question because I did not go to high school here in Nashville. I went to boarding school in Northern Virginia, D.C. area.
Oh my gosh. So you were, man, I've never met anyone that's been to a boarding school before.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
How different is it compared to your typical everyday public high school?
Yeah, I mean, in one way, I could never answer that question because I didn't go to my local public high school. But I do know, I mean, it was like, in some ways, like college light, because we lived on a dorm. I had roommates and all that. One thing that I kind of was talking to somebody the other day about was how, as far as just growing up generally and having certain adult skills, I've been doing my own laundry by myself since I was 13 years old, or 14 years old, I guess. And so, to this day, my wife and I do our laundry separately, which is probably not that crazy or uncommon. No. But it was something that I've done, my mom wasn't doing it for me.
Because no one else is going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So things like that, just learning those kind of skills and, being away from our parents. Like we weren't allowed to have a car or anything like that. But it was cool. We were right outside of D.C. So we got, the school offered all these resources. As far as that goes, we got to go to presidential inaugurations. That's cool. As an entire school. Just stuff like that that's really cool and unique. But I don't know anything else, Well, I can understand that. And then not only that, you got to mature though. And that's the thing, that you go anywhere, right? If you leave your area, you're going to mature in some way. So you're basically saying that when I went to high school, maybe I had the luxury of being around my family, being around my younger brother and sister, and not realizing like when I went to college, that's when you have to do it all yourself. Yeah.
You did that like 4 years prior to that experience.
Yeah.
And which prestigious college did you go to again?
So for college, I went to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles.
My gosh, man. It's just like it seems like you're just finding ways to always. Yeah, exactly. What was college like?
I loved it. I just loved it so much. LMU was my first choice for school, and I got in and I just went there. It was easy. Beautiful, unbelievable. I mean, it's a smaller school, something around about 5,000 undergrad students, right there in LA. And so, I mean, I was just in LA recently to visit some friends, and part of me thinks I'm so glad that I don't live there now, but I wouldn't have traded the college experience there for anything. I mean, it was just kind of, everything was somewhat surreal when I look back on it, because, in so many ways, college is not real life. And so having to, the ability to have that experience in Los Angeles, it's like you you don't have all of the.
You're not really growing. You're it's in La La Land. Literally, you're in La La Land.
That's right.
And so, I mean, what were some of, you were talking about some experiences, right? Just give me one off the top of your head, an experience that you just got to enjoy being over there.
Seeing the Pacific Ocean from the bed in my dorm on campus. Just like that's. Hold up. I mean, you can't beat that. You know, that's
my gosh.
The Hollywood sign from. So that was my senior year, and then freshman year, when there was, you know, maybe after a day of rain, when the smog wasn't covering everything, you see the Hollywood sign from our dorm. It was just kind of crazy.
I see what you mean by kind of looking back at it, because that's something that people only dream of. Yeah. That would actually do that. But you got to see the difference though in cities, and a lot of people that do come on the show, actually, some of them are from the Los Angeles area. Yeah. And there's glowing reviews, and then there's also now like not as glowing reviews as today. Yeah. And you really do see now living in Nashville, and you just said you just visited out there. Yeah. I mean, how different would you consider them?
You know, it's so. I mean, they're kind of worlds apart. Both. I mean, culturally, above all, really. Mm-hmm. But you know, geographically, it's like we're in the bowl in the kind of Cumberland Plateau next to the Smoky Mountains, mm-hmm. and all that. And it's, you know, oak trees for palm trees kind of a thing. Ocean, we've got mountains. Well,
yes, we have mountains, but you know, it's one thing I've realized living here is that seafood is a little harder to come by.
Yeah, I've not. I mean, I've heard of a couple really excellent sushi places around town, but it's hard. You know, mm-hmm. like sushi is a good kind of judge of the quality of food. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing we're gonna transition to, you know, you actually stumbling across, you know, y'all's old distillery. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, beyond doing that, were you ever really in love with whiskey?
Before that?
Yes.
Not that much. I mean, I had honestly just gotten into considering starting to drink scotch. So I was like the 55-year-old man in me was coming out and like, I think I ought to get into scotch. And I had tried maybe Macallan 12 or something like mm-hmm. that. It's like, oh, I could do this. But it, you know, to be honest, most of it was like, I was a year out of college. So it was more like, what do you play beer pong with? You know, it was like absolutely. Bud Light, that kind of a thing. So I was certainly not what I would call a sophisticated drinker. But then after that, it was all, you know, what I call market research.
Well, I think that's a lot of people that drink bourbon and enjoy whiskey typically either come from that side first, or they go to, I'll let you get a drink of that, or they go into drinking scotches first. Now, me and my own bourbon journey, I fell in love with scotch first. And it's just because I wanted to feel fancy. Yeah. And I wanted to spend more money than I had to buy a bottle, right? Now, like you said, like I started the show, you guys stumbled across finding more of your history. Mm-hmm. I mean, what was that situation like? Don't give me the whole story, because they got to go to the distillery to get the whole story. And like I said, the distillery does. Whenever I have someone in town, I swear I take them there because it's a fun history lesson. Because you are a history buff. Yeah. And I'm a history buff. I love history. So I love bringing them to your distillery to learn about the history of Nashville, but then also learning the history about your family.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I definitely appreciate you bringing some folks our way. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole point is, you know, there are distilleries popping up, you know, so much more frequently nowadays. And, you know, the distillery itself, everybody has their own kind of unique factory. I'll just call it, in terms of a physical factory, there's similar equipment and everything like that, different scales of such. But the thing that we have that's different is, we have a built-in history lesson. The reason that all of this equipment exists right now in this setup is because of the family history that we have. And so that's, it is a history lesson, almost above all.
And I think that's what I love about it the most, because you can go to, and like, you guys already know this about me. Every time actually, what are you drinking on right now? What are we drinking on? We'll cheers on that.
What was this? This was Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey, right?
Yes, that's what it was. That's right. And
cheers.
Mm-hmm. As I've gone through my bourbon journey myself, I've gone to many different distilleries. And I've gone to, and a lot of them are kind of cut and dry. This is my history, but then also look at this neat fancy stuff. Let's have a drink now. Yeah. It's kind of it's the history first with you guys. And that's what I love about it. Now, what was it like stumbling across the old Nelson distillery?
I mean, so I've told this, I've talked about this so much, and the thing that I love about it is I've never gotten tired of telling this, because it was such a almost mind-blowing experience for me and for Charlie and really our mom and dad too. The way that I best describe it is that, each moment becomes more surreal than the last in this sequence where we, basically stumble upon, like you said, the land on which our family's old distillery existed. And we quickly learned, and again, I guess I'll just go through a little bit of it because it'll make sense. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of bits and pieces together. But basically, in 2006, my brother and I was a year out of college, and Charlie still had a semester left. But we were both home for the summer, and Dad went in for 3 other buddies to buy a full cow worth of meat from a butcher who lived in Brier, Tennessee. So for reference, Brier is half-hour drive north of Nashville, a little bit northwest. And we get in the car, me, Charlie, Mom, and Dad, head up to Brier, stop to get gas just a little bit before we got to the butcher's house. And at the gas station, there's this, corner of Springfield Highway and Main Street in Brier, Tennessee. And we stop, and there's this historical marker right at the corner of the gas station. And it says Nelson's Brier Distillery, and it was just, the way, Charlie says all the hair on the back of his neck stood up, if not on his whole body, which again,
it's like seeing a ghost almost. It's like, it's so unbelievable to see something that has history, has deep rooted history. Yeah. Great grandfather, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So because we had known, it was almost like maybe a ghost that you'd have a dream of before, but didn't know if it was real. And then all of a sudden you see it. So because we had heard kind of rumors and sort of speculation or whatever from the family back when we were growing up, but truly it was no more than a couple kind of comments. One was, if we could only get only find that spring, we could get the old family business back up and running. And as a 9, 10, 11, I didn't know what that meant. It didn't even register. But I remember that being a thing. Always this family business somewhere in the back of my mind. And then there's the story my dad told about, our family ancestor falling off the boat with the family fortune in gold. And we heard some vague story about that I thought, to be honest, was fake. I thought my dad was making it up. Turns out he wasn't. But there's that. And then we had heard that there was some sort of whiskey thing in the family in Brier back in the day. And we didn't know if it was real, for one, true at all. We didn't know how big it was, if it was legal, anything like that. And, as it turns out, it was the biggest in the state of Tennessee back in the day, fully legal and everything. So it's kind of wild.
The story, I'm going to give you applause for that because I appreciate you telling us a little bit of that story. And it really is almost like a legend, where a lot of times when you think about the history of your family or my family, we don't know all the roots to it unless and ancestry does not give you a story. And I think what's amazing is that you guys were able to keep the brand and keep the family legacy alive.
Yeah.
And how challenging was it when you first thought about okay, this is what we stumbled across. This is in our roots. What made you guys say, okay, let's continue?
Well, first of all, I will say, I'll answer the question in just a second, but I must perhaps respectfully disagree. I think your ancestry is perhaps the most inherent. It is the definition of story. And the reason I say that is because for us, it would have been the same had we not gone to that butcher that one day. Maybe 20 years from now, we would have somehow figured it out and heard about it or whatever, but it would have been I'm 60. What am I going to do?
Oh, I meant the .com ancestry. That was my fault. I should have said ancestry.com.
But what I was going to get to is that it was in our family, and we happened to find or hear about this one cool shining gem, which caused us to literally get on ancestry.com and find all these things. And I think that probably so many people don't. I don't know, just haven't done that yet. Yeah, but truly, I believe if you dig far enough and you're able to get deep enough in your family history, that's where the very, very best stories are. They're just these little diamonds kind of hidden where you maybe in plain sight, but you have to go digging, but they're for sure there. And that's the best stuff. The whole, like, truth is stranger than fiction. All it comes
maybe
from
it's because I'm scared. Maybe it's the Hispanic in me, because Hispanics like to, or well, at least my family being Hispanic, we are scared to go to the doctor because we don't want to find out something that's going to alter your life. So maybe this is just my own personal view, looking at it like, man, who knows who I was related to back in the day.
You're talking to like purebred white boy. Like, my ancestry truly is like 98% British and Irish, and there's an own sort of long history of that generally, but fortunately we found that it's like, oh my God, this is like whiskey stuff. This is way cooler than what we could have potentially found. I mean, maybe there's still some of that in there, but you guys were able to kind of not only find, like I said, find the history, but what made you want to continue the legacy? So we just knew that, whiskey is such a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And certainly that culturally, it's like, if you're involved in this business, in so many ways, it doesn't feel like a real job, because it's interesting, it's fun. Like, our entire thing in this industry is to, facilitate good times
and educate.
There is a lot of history that goes into it, and education. So we immediately recognized, like, hold on a second. We had the largest distillery in the state of Tennessee, but really, I guess the kind of physical, tangible answer to that question is, so we went to, this gas station. We saw this historical marker, and then we went over to the butcher's house. So the butcher lived about a mile east, which, if you'll recall on the sign, it said 1 mile east on Long Branch Road, Charles Nelson opened the Brier Distillery. And so we head to the butcher's house and we asked him what he knew about the old distillery. And he said, you're standing on the land that the old distillery was on. This is it. Look across the street, across the little 2-lane country road. We see this old kind of rusted barrel warehouse, but it was definitely a whiskey barrel warehouse, and saw all this stuff. And that was, I said before, like, every moment kind of being more surreal than the last. Mm-hmm. And that's where it started. And then Chuck, the butcher, told us to go back over to Greenbrier Historical Society, just a couple blocks back from where we came. Mm-hmm. And there was a room kind of dedicated to the history of the distillery. And within that room, there's this little glass case with these two original bottles, a Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey with our name on it. They were empty, but they were 150 years old. And that was like...
And that's what you got right there to your left, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't look... Was it that pretty originally?
Oh, yeah. And in fact, it was... The whole idea with this was to kind of recreate as much of the original label as possible and do everything as close as we could. So, it didn't have Chaz and W.A. Nelson on there. It just had Chaz Nelson. But W.A., that's me. So, yeah, it was, we try to keep, in fact, one of the other cool things, we got the bottle mold itself. We took one of those original bottles and had it 3D scanned. And so the glass mold of this bottle is exactly based on the 150-year-old bottle.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Now, we also got to talk, we're going to go on to our first break, but I definitely want to talk about developing the skills of running a business. So, like I said, you were one year out of college.
Yeah.
Okay. So business. I don't know, what were you doing prior to in college that would help you establish and run a business?
Not studying business, that's for sure. My brother and I both studied. We were philosophy. That's what we studied in school, and so I would say a whole lot of hard thinking is what we were doing. It was the critical thinking, though. I will say, shout out to philosophy degrees and all that, but there's not frankly an hour that goes by where I don't feel grateful for those skills. It really is just critical thinking skills, I think, is the most important. But there's nothing on paper that would have led you to believe we could run a business well, particularly one in an industry where we had no experience. Although, to be fair, there wasn't an industry in which we had experience just yet. And also,
licensing was a thing back then, right?
Yeah.
So licensing didn't open up to, was it run a distillery, or was it... It was 2010, I believe, right?
Yeah. So within the state of Tennessee, the laws only allowed for production of distilled spirits in 3 counties within the state. That was Lincoln, Moore, and Coffee County.
Nashville and Davidson was not one of those counties.
That's right. And so, long story short, some legislation was passed with the help of a handful of craft distillers that opened up, I believe at that time it was 40-ish more counties within the state to allow for the distillation of beverage alcohol. Davidson County was one of them. And so, because of that, that's why we opened our new distillery here in Davidson County in Nashville.
Man, and then also finding that location. That location that you guys are in is forever expanding, it seems. Yeah.
It's super exciting. I mean, we're right now, as we record this, in the middle of
another expansion.
Build out and all bar, restaurant inside the distillery. And
well, everything. Let's not give them. Wait. We got to take our break before we get on to all that. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go down and talk about creating this amazing whiskey and this distilling of this whiskey. My favorite conversation. All right, so Andy, now let's get down to constructing a distillery. What the heck? How? I mean, is there even a book to how to construct something like that?
No, but kind of yes, but no. Now they're actually. I've not even read this. I only heard fairly recently, in the last couple of months, that there's a book about opening, it's tips and tricks and things like that, probably more than tips and tricks. I don't mean to speak for it because, again, I haven't read it, but it's about opening a new distillery. And so literally, I guess now there is, but I had not heard of one before then. And so that
it would have been helpful, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would have, yes. But now that we are where we are, I'm pretty glad that there wasn't one.
Okay. So talk to me about what was the first challenge, really, of constructing everything.
Raising the money to do it. Hands down. The worst trying to raise money for something is so difficult to do.
I mean,
at least it was for us.
Well, you're in the right time or the right spot. Talk a little bit more about that. So how is it to start a business, building the funds and looking for these investors? What's that like? So
we learned so much patience in that process that I don't even care to, think about it again. But so for us, we thought that raising money was going to be the easy part, right? So we found this history. We realized we've got to bring this business back. Okay, how do we do that? We write a business plan. We have this story, and that's the genesis of all of it is the story.
The pitch.
And so of course, that is the pitch. That's when we're sampling people on our whiskey, we tell them the story first, and that makes it taste better to them, And so when trying to raise the money, we tell them this story and all this, and they're like, so what do you think? And of course, someone with enough money to be considered a potential investor is going to ask questions like vetting 101, for example.
Okay.
Have you ever worked in a distillery? Have you ever run a business? Have you ever run a distillery? Do you know that you can make prove to me that the product you're making is going to be good, and also then 4 years from now when you take it out of a barrel that it will still be good, or and of course the answer to every one of those questions was no.
At least you're honest.
Well, yeah. And, that was just, but it was we weren't making it easy on ourselves. But we had no other choice because that was, what are we going to do? Tell people, yeah, we know all about this, how to do it.
You can't lie. You can't lie. When it comes to money, you have to say the ugly truth. And the ugly truth may be maybe your numbers are not there. Maybe your experience is not there. But really what it takes is, and this is what we're learning here in the Gulch, is that it takes that one person, it takes that one investor, that one person that believes in you. Not necessarily what is possible, what you can do, but they believe in you. Yeah. And I'm guessing that's what happened.
That's exactly right. I mean, that is exactly what happened because we, it was so hard, but we knew it was the right thing to do the way, go about it because, there were even strangely a small handful of investors or groups who told us, I really like your business plan. And what I want to do is give you every penny you're asking for. But here's the catch. I want to give you more than that because I think you need to change your projections and we need to grow quicker than this and all. And there's one particular instance of that was very exciting for about 25 seconds. And then we realize, hold on, this is not what we want to do. Like they're perhaps taking one of their own, fantasies of having a whiskey company and pumping it up and like trying to get all big real quickly. And we knew in our hearts we'd spent these years and years trying to figure out how to do this, and we knew that wasn't right. So we had to say, thank you very much, but we're going to find other money. And so it really was all about finding those individuals who believed in what we were doing despite our lack of experience. But the one thing we did have more than anybody else, I can guarantee you, was this passion for it. And we knew that, perhaps maybe this is where the philosophy degree comes in. Just thinking and understanding ourselves, we knew that maybe we didn't have a degree, but we're good at learning on the fly. And if we're focused on something, we'll do it. End of story. We'll do whatever we want to do. If we're focused and have passion for it, we will make it happen.
Well, let's make it a little deeper. Talking about philosophy, right? It's kind of like whiskey. When you go into the barrel, you're not starting off as the end product. And when you're going through that end product, it's going to come out with its own intricacies. Excuse me. What I'm trying to say is its own unique characteristics. So, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And it never comes out originally unless you want White Dog.
Right.
It doesn't come out in time. So in reality, you guys were just that whiskey going into the barrel.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It's really funny because maybe the first sales call we ever did with our, the first product we released, which was Belle Meade Bourbon in 2012. And we were at a sales call talking to this guy who was the buyer of a store in town. And we asked him, big mistake on my part, but big learning experience. I didn't tell him what is in this whiskey. I didn't tell him the story. The first thing I said, so green, I said, well, I'm curious what you think. And he was looking at me and Charlie in the eye, who, by the way, again, 2012, we were 28 and 26 years old, I guess. Is that right? No, 30. Sorry. 2012. Yeah. Anyway, easy math.
You don't look too far away from it, man. Maybe it's because of the shaved face and everything.
Yeah. I'm 40 years old right now.
Well, I don't see too many white hairs, man. You're looking good.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, so what he did was looked me and Charlie in the face and he said, it's a little young, a little immature, maybe unexperienced. And he was thinking what he was thinking about us and saying, this is what this whiskey is. Oof. And it was really hard, but we also knew he wasn't right. Like, we knew this whiskey was good. This was good stuff. We felt it, everybody else, but it was just so, as an example of like people not believing that you maybe have the pedigree to do something. It's like, we're proving ourselves by doing it, not by showing that we've done it in the past. Well,
you did bring it up, and you actually teed it up really nicely for me. So the Belle Meade Bourbon.
Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, that has won an award. It has won. How many awards has Belle Meade Bourbon actually won?
Well, it's hard to count.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't have a number, but there's some pretty good stuff. I mean, double gold medals at San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which is a big one. We had Belle Meade Reserve win, a top 10 in the world by Whiskey Advocate magazine in the past. And so, yeah, some pretty good
accolades. Yes. And not only that, though, it's what's amazing about y'all's facility and the history lesson that you guys give out to everyone is you learn about the horses on these bottles. Well, I guess here's the thing. These guys are slowly trickling out, right? So this is now officially just only located in Tennessee?
In Nashville, yeah.
In Nashville.
Yeah. So at the time that we're recording this is only available currently in Nashville, but it's going to be kind of replaced branding wise with a brand called Nelson Brothers.
And let's talk about it. So Nelson Brothers you guys released this, was it last year?
Yep.
Yeah, last year, because I remember seeing the branding. Look, I want to ask the question that everyone in Nashville wants to ask. When you changed the branding, were you expecting, just the from everyone in the city?
Kind of. I mean, we have to expect that because it was a big change, but it was one of these decisions that was certainly not made lightly. It was the only brand that we had in the beginning of the business was Belle Meade. But then what we experienced was that when Brier got released, and we were presenting it to buyers, to consumers, people at festivals and things like that, people would see Brier next to Belle Meade, and there was confusion.
Disconnect.
They didn't understand that the same producer made both brands. And even, to be honest, at the distillery, people would come do a full 45-minute tour, hour-long tour experience, and could ask any questions they could. We were telling them all about our brands, our story, and all this. And some of them still came out confused about, like, wait, you guys make Greenbrier and Belle Meade? It's like, what's happening? So with that kind of understood, Greenbrier was the reason that we started the business. You know, that day that I told you about in 2006, we saw these original bottles of this, and it was like, this is what we started. So Belle Meade was in some ways always considered like a bridge to help us get to Greenbrier. So if that makes sense. So
it does. Absolutely.
So when we see that these two brands, kind of disparate brands, are confusing people in the marketplace, that becomes a real business problem. And so while, I mean, I've been on record about this before, like, it's a really annoying, it's a pain in the ass to do what we've done and switch from a brand that's been around for 10 years to a new brand that people don't yet know. But long term, if people understand that, you know, Greenbrier and Nelson Brothers, they look much more similar. You can tell immediately that they're from us, the same producer.
Right.
That's what we're going for. So it's, you know, it's tough, and it takes a while.
It was tough. So let me, for the folks that are watching this in Texas, right? So one thing is, when you live in the heart, nearly the heart of, you know, near Kentucky, where bourbon releases is a real thing here. And we talk about going to GameStop and holding out for a game and waiting outside for a night. We got people out here and waiting outside of liquor stores. I'm one of them, that will stay overnight to hopefully grab that Covenant bottle, that hard to get bottle. And literally what I have right here is actually might make people mad, because this is my favorite one that you guys ever made.
Yeah,
so this is the Belle Meade tequila cask. It is a phenomenal one, and it hurts my heart because you guys released this at your distillery, and it was a one-time release.
Yeah.
And how many I'm going to talk about mine. I don't care which one's y'all's favorite. This is my favorite. This is my show. So I want to talk about this one.
Yeah.
So how many barrels were released of this tequila?
The tequila cask finish. Oh my God. So that year we did 5 different cask finishes. And so
it drove people bonkers.
Yeah.
Waiting for you. I was legit sitting in this studio looking at my phone, not knowing when it was going to happen.
Yeah.
But I saw the picture of the different ones you guys had. You had the green one, the
Calvados.
Thank you. I didn't want to mess up that one. And so you guys had a bunch of releases that year. And when was this? 2021?
That would have been 21, I believe. Yeah. Right? Yeah. This is 23. Right. Yeah.
Because you switched over in 2022.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. So then this was a smaller release, correct?
Yes. I want to say there were between 1 and 4 tequila casks that we used, that we filled for that one.
Which one was your favorite of the Belle Meade releases?
Of that particular year, the 5 that we did a vanilla cask finish, which was really interesting.
It's interesting.
There was some producer of vanilla extract who had something like a truckload of barrels that they just tried aging vanilla extract and used bourbon barrels. They were not our used bourbon barrels, but then they dumped the vanilla extract out and sold them to anybody else. And I said, let's try one of those. And it turned out to be, that may have been my favorite from that year, the vanilla extract cask. But we did 1 single barrel of that, and that was it. We may never, ever be able to do that again. Anyway, so there's vanilla, there was a cherry brandy cask, a peach brandy cask, the Calvados, and the tequila cask.
And then and the one that everyone is thinking about, the one that actually made a big rounds around the whiskey community has to be the honey.
Yeah.
That honey is so, y'all, and there's a lot of different takes on people that make bourbon whiskey with honey. Not all the times does it actually, blend very well together. You guys made one that kind of took everyone by storm, really, in 2020, I believe, or was it 2019?
We did
multiple.
So we did one in 2020 because that happened on March 7th was the release, which was, as far as I remember, the day before the world shut down, or at least the week before the world shut down. Yeah. But that wasn't the first time we had ever done it, I don't think. That was the second or maybe even third.
Well, it was just, first of all, that was one of the cooler labels I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So instead of having the horses, which they have names, what were the names of the horses? I don't want to mess that up.
So there's Bonnie Scotland, on the left, and Brown Dick on the right. They were real race horses at the Belle Meade Horse Farm back in the day.
But with the honey, you turn them into bees.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such a clever, and then also even the logo even had, I think it was, what's the bees come inside the...
in the honeycomb.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of like, when we started considering the label, it was like, I know you say it's clever and I agree, but it was also like, obviously we have to do this. Like there's animals, let's just change it to bees, of course. The barrels, it's like,
and then
hex pattern. In
2022, so 2022, you guys decided to go with Nelson Bros, and it's not only Nelson Brothers, it's just short.
Yeah, and the Bros period is just an old school.
Exactly, old school abbreviation for it. I mean, obviously we talked about the challenges on that. We talked about, it's not necessarily uproar. It was just more people that were just like confused at first. Mm-hmm. After hearing the story about the reason behind it, makes so much sense. Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, was it challenge? How's it been a year in to get folks to, go back to taste the brand?
The key, I mean, it's been all right. The key has been, essentially tasting side by side, because the flavor profile of what's in the bottle is very, very similar. I mean, we tweak the blend just a little bit, but it was kind of necessary. Like we tweak the blend with any product that we do. It's just for the sake of product continuity and integrity. So anyway, it's very, very similar. And so it's still coming from our same pool inventory of barrels and all that. So, and to be honest, a lot of people have said they prefer, in fact, probably 9 out of 10, to be honest, have said when we try the Belle Meade Classic next to Nelson Brothers Classic, they prefer the Nelson Brothers, and the same with the Reserve. So, but everybody's different. But it's very, very similar product. It's more of just a different branding approach, so that we have more, I guess you could say it like, trending more towards the branded house mentality as opposed to house of brands.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of, we got a couple more minutes of us talking about this before we have to go to these crowd noise questions. But the question that I want to ask is, what's it been like to see these different types of, these different angles that you've been going with different brands and different, like I said, you had different releases. I mean, has it been challenging to keep up with all this?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I would think from an outsider's point of view that, that's crazy. But the thing is, we just add on a little bit more. Like we add on a little bit more, and then we get used to it. And this is our sort of workload, or physical or sort of intellectual workload, or branding wise. And then we get that, and we get comfortable with that. And so, okay, well, now let's add this little thing. And you just add incrementally, and so it doesn't. It's not like everything changing all at once. That's we do it in such a way that is
scalable.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, we all talk about scaling and talk about your new facility. Well, in the facility, you guys are scaling it to be even better than it was before. Because when I went to visit you guys, every time I had people come over, it was obviously after the pandemic. And after the pandemic, sadly, you guys stopped doing a little bit more of the tours behind the house, right? Outside of the main area in the middle.
Yeah.
Now, talk to me about the expansion of the distillery.
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, so when we first gained access to this building, we got control, I guess, of these 2 bays of the warehouse, which we now call it Bay B and Bay C. And then over time, and so that was where we built our production floor, our offices, our tasting room, our event space, our barrel warehouse space, and all. And then over time, we got control of the bay to our left, which we then turned into more barrel storage. And then shortly thereafter, the bay to our right. So suddenly now then we have 4 bays of the warehouse. Warehouse D, as we call it, the most recent one, really had nothing in it until recently. And we just moved our offices into that, which is a huge, huge help. And now we've got our, tasting facility our tour facility is now up and running. We never stopped, or we did stop for a couple of weeks.
It was only for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting kind of away from the question. Post-COVID, changed things up a bit. Also, when we opened back up, our physical production had ramped up so much that it was getting, just physically hazardous and dangerous to bring more human beings onto the production floor.
It was getting serious back there. So that's a good answer for that.
So anyway, now we're in the middle of building out a kind of revamped production floor and everything. So to get back to it, our new gift shop, tasting room, tour, kind of hallway of history, as we call it, that's all brand new, much larger and more catered towards exactly what we want. And then you'll see our bottling line, which is open now. Eventually, we will open back up tours of the actual physical production facility. Now, and the cool thing about that is we'll be able to build a tour path such that a human being on a tour will never be in direct path of, say, a forklift or anything like that. So it's easy to make it much safer and cater toward that kind of thing.
And would you say that most of your guests, most visitors that come in, because it's not only just visitors too, because this is a whole new experience that people are get to experience. And hopefully when this releases, everything will be up and running, and that'll be in the late summertime.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that there was a demand for this change?
100%. The main impetus for this entire change, which is a drastic change. We're expanding from 30,000 to 50,000 square feet. So we're changing so much around. But the reason we even started considering it was because particularly on Saturdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and especially in the summertime, we have so many guests that we had to cap our tours at 30 people, and every single week our tours would fill up, and we'd have to turn people away.
Yeah, you had to turn me away sometimes too.
Yeah, our gift shop was so small, and people would see that it was packed, and they say, "I don't even want to deal with it. I'm going to just go home." And so, kind of business wise, and what people wanted, the demand was there, and we were having to turn people away. So we say, it just makes so much sense to expand and do what we're doing.
And I love that. And like I said, guys, you guys have to go check it out for yourselves when you guys come visit Nashville, or if you guys are local residents here, that one thing, my favorite thing is to go into y'all's facility is the little beforehand, before the tour, you get a taste of like a cocktail.
Yeah.
And you get to relax for a little second before you get onto the tour, which is right there. And has that flow changed at all?
No. Still the same thing. You can buy a cocktail, you can buy a flight of our products without doing the whole tour. But I fully recommend the whole tour. But because it is a cool history lesson. But yeah, you can just sit in and not do a tour at all and just sit and have a few cocktails if you'd like.
And it's a very comfortable area to do that. So, okay, we're going to take this break right now, and then we're going to come back with crowd noise where people ask you some questions. You ready to do that?
I'm ready.
All right, we'll be right back.
Hi, Andy. John Edwards here. Just wondering, since you were able to kind of build out your own distillery with this renovation, what was that like? Talk about, after you've been doing it for so many years, you got to kind of wipe the slate clean and do everything the way you wanted it. What was that like? Wanted it.
Well, thank you, John, for the question. Good to hear your voice. So it was
Dad's Drinking Bourbon, everyone. So shout out to Dad's Drinking Bourbon. John, you're an amazing friend. Thank you so much for just submitting that question. I love it.
Yeah. And by the way, John was the first guest on my podcast.
You don't think I researched all this to get all this done? Come on.
I know you knew that, but
that's true.
So I guess to answer that question, so many different things to say about this, because it was simultaneously exciting and terrifying, and also like I almost constantly felt like I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and it was overwhelming, the amount of data. Like we'd have just asking things about vendors for equipment, and it was like they'd ask me questions that required a mechanical or chemical engineering degree. I'm like, what? Am I supposed to know this? So there's a little bit of fear in that, but pretty intimidating. But then it was all about surrounding ourselves with the right people. So very, very exciting, huge learning experience. yeah, especially just watching the physical plant getting built. But a freaking thrill ride nonetheless.
Well, I mean, what isn't life without having these learning experiences? And especially for you guys got to learn from the ground up in developing this incredible brand.
Yeah.
So talk about now, I'm not going to let this go without talking about Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Okay. So when you had John in your podcast, so what was the name of that podcast one more time for everyone to see?
Of my podcast is Still Life.
And you can find it located on y'all's website.
The website and anywhere else you get podcasts.
Exactly. And so what was that like? What was that conversation like?
So I was trying to figure out what I wanted the podcast to be about, to be honest. I mean, this name Still Life was like, of course we have to take that name. But also, like, I am not I'm pretty drawn to, chill, just calm energy. And so Still Life was like, okay, double meaning, triple meaning, however many you want to assign to it.
Okay.
And so I knew it wanted to be about the industry, but I was more interested in personal stories and how someone got into it. To be honest, also John has been, podcasting, blogging for a long time. And so like, maybe I could get some tips from him and things like that. But he was a friend. It's like, why not start with people whose numbers I already have, and who are good talkers and things like that. So it was pretty easy for John to be a candidate for guest numero uno.
Well, and not only that, talk about the guests you've had, because as of right now, you're on episode 7 with the fellow from Jack Daniel's Distillery, which is crazy to just even say by itself. But talk to me about the guests and how challenging it must be getting these guests.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm still running through the people that I know personally, which is great. And as I say that out loud, I'm like, how cool is this? Like, I know all these people personally. So the first couple guests, it was John Edwards from Dad's Drinking Bourbon. The second was Sienna Rouse, who by trade, as she would say, if you listen to the episode, when someone asks, what does she do? She's a poet. But she's a friend of the distillery, a Louisa Nelson Award winner. Look up the Louisa Nelson Awards, please. But at least industry adjacent, because she's also trying to open a whiskey bar and sort of library, like a book whiskey bar kind of a thing. Sounds amazing. Anyway, let's see, who else did we have on? Chip Tate, big industry sort of living legend almost in the industry. We've had Marianne Eves. We had who was long story and resume of her own. I don't want to go too much into each individual.
Yeah, you have to listen to it yourself. That you can find at nelsonsgreenbrier.com right on the right hand side.
Yeah, Still Life. So and then Ketch Secor is the frontman singer for Old Crow Medicine Show. We've known them for a little while, and then the most recent one. Chris Fletcher, the master distiller for Jack Daniel's. And
it takes time, as we're talking about it off air. It takes time to gain that rapport, to gain that time. That time it just takes. It's repetition, right? I'm guessing you're a sports player at some point, right?
Sure. Yeah, I always played sports.
Yeah, man, you're tall, man. So I expect you to play some some sports. Now. Also, when it comes down to creating a podcast, what are some of the most challenging things you've had to deal with so far?
Gosh, I mean, so my brother Sean is the one who produces it. And so he's got a lot more challenge than I do, to be honest, because
that's true.
As you know, I mean, the challenge is the editing, just the work that goes on it behind the scenes. Yeah. The challenge to me is being able to, the thing that I love about it is thinking on my feet and just letting loose and having an interview with an individual, just a conversation, really. And so that's the fun part. The challenging thing is afterwards, kind of dissecting, okay, what did I do? I really wish I had followed up on this and just the mechanics of interviewing and the blocking and tackling kind of a thing. That's what it takes to get better. And so I'm of course always trying to do that. But yeah, as we were talking beforehand, before recording, I just it drives me nuts because I don't do them all that often. I've not done multiple in a day or 3 or 4 a day or I'm trying to.
Don't.
I need to do something though.
Yeah,
I need
but
to get
you
my
don't.
reps going.
You don't need to do 4 in a day. It ain't.
No,
I've done 4 in a day, and I'm telling you, man, it's just like after, and you have to stay lubricated with water, but then also you want to be nice to guests that come into the show, and if they're drinking, you feel obligated to drink.
Sure.
And you can only imagine 4 interviews. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it ain't pretty.
Yeah, 4 is a lot, because I also just let it go. If it's going to last 3 hours, I'll talk for 3 hours. You know, that's the beauty of it. Then we'll cut from there. But
well, we definitely want to ask who is your not dream guest, but who's a guest that you would really like to have on your podcast?
Anyone living or dead?
No, and just someone living. How about that?
Gosh, you know, it's strange because I feel like so lame because I haven't really even thought of this. But
they asked me the same thing on TV like not too long ago. What's my dream guest? I didn't even think about it until I came off the cuff right there.
Yeah, this is going to be like, this is the worst radio ever. Dead air. I mean, it would have to be probably someone who I don't know. I mean, no offense to everybody I know, but like I know you. I can, you know.
I can get that, make that happen.
Because the other thing is like I'm trying to keep it within the industry, but also, I mean, I had Catch Secor. He's not really he's in a band. He's in a, you know.
They drink.
Yeah. So it worked, but I mean, the reason I asked living or dead, because of course Charles Nelson, maybe Louisa, those would be.
Yeah, but I was trying to get you out of that out.
You know what? Actually, this may be my answer, although it's maybe the most attainable. I find it'd be really interesting just to have my brother on. Maybe we should do that.
What would he? All right. So, what's y'all's dynamic like? Actually, that's a great question. So, what are you and Charlie like?
He is more kind of, I guess, outspoken or at least outgoing. And I'm more kind of, I don't know, go with the flow. I'm just more, let me sit on the sidelines and observe kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And for sure, the reason that we work well together is, again, we know that each other, you know, we want each other's best interest, but also because he's more of a big picture idea guy, thinker, and I am more in the weeds. Like, okay, this is the idea. How do we physically execute this? How does this happen? And so I just get more into the minutia, and he's like, I don't care how it gets done, just do it.
That's a dangerous combination, man, because if you guys really are like, you know, one thing's bigger, one thing's more strategically, and well, y'all both think strategically, but one just goes into the details, that makes one of the best kind of relationships in business. But who's jockeying for position to get a word in? Who do you think? Do they go by age? Do you guys go by like, yo, I'm older, so I can say this is the way, or how does it work?
So actually, it's funny because despite me being older, I didn't even. So his title is, when we first started, was president and CEO, and I was vice president and COO. You know, which operate. So, but it was. I didn't really care about the title of president. He got the title of president because he was better at just talking to people generally, you know, and so, and more, I guess, initially charismatic and that kind of a thing. But it was also just his skill set was better. So I totally accepted that. I didn't want that position. Now, sometimes, you know, we're still brothers.
Exactly. So. That's what I'm getting at. So when does the brotherly, you know, does that show up at work?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sometimes, like people are assistant, you know, people who work like aside us and alongside us and everything, will for sure tell you like, God, these guys, you know, can't agree on anything.
Shout out to your assistant too, because your assistant is really nice, by the way.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Now, okay, so we got one more question here, and let's see what this one says.
Hey Andy, I was wondering if you could go back and do everything over again, knowing what you know now, what would be the biggest thing that you would do differently and why?
God, great question. You know, I feel like every answer I give would be a cop-out answer to this question, but I 100% am confident in my position that every single minute decision that I've ever made in my life has led me to here. And I am very, very happy with this. In so many ways, there's nothing I would have changed, you know, because even the things like that I feel like I regretted at the moment, or were really difficult in the moment. Like maybe it's just I meet a particular individual who I'm like, you're really like not a nice person. You're not, I don't want to associate with you at all, or you make things a whole lot harder and all that. But legitimately, I mean, it taught me so much about just humanity and what you deal with on a day-to-day basis if you're just out in the world being. And so, God, I hate giving that answer because I know
there's nothing
even
wrong.
myself, I'm looking for, I'm like, but what is that one thing? I truly don't know, because there legitimately is value in everything, especially the mistakes.
Okay, well then actually let me rephrase this question. For the person that's watching this right now that may be interested in diving in the same realm that you dived into, right? In the world of whiskey and bourbon and all this, what are some things that you could tell them to maybe help them get through a shortcut?
Oh gosh, this is maybe the hardest thing to hear, is that like what I was going to get at was that what we heard endlessly from everybody when we were first starting out, everybody in the industry that we talked to, they said the thing you have to have in this business is patience, patience, patience. Having some money doesn't help, but patience, can overcome that. So we certainly didn't have any money, so patience was what we had to have. Now, I will say this, that if I had known ahead of time in 2006, if I had some crystal ball and I could see how difficult and how time consuming and how emotionally exhausting and physically this whole thing was going to be, in 2006, I don't know that I would have said, yeah, I'm in, let's do it anyway. I don't know that. There's part of me that thinks I probably would have said, no, let's try something else. But having come out the other side, that naivete about that was the best quality we could have had, the best thing we could have had going for us, because all that to say, whatever, patience is what you need, and just have faith in the patience, because if you believe in it and if you feel like you're going to do it, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Well, that to piggyback what you were saying, because I thought you were going somewhere with it, which you were. Being naive and starting a business is sometimes the best thing, because you're going in learning.
Yeah.
And that's where I thought you were going to fit. I thought that's where you're going to rope it in right there. But it's all about you learning something, being naive, because it's, yes, there's going to be a lot of valleys. There's going to be some large valleys that you got to cross at some point. But the thing is, though, if you knew that valley was coming, just like what you said, you wouldn't have gone down to that valley.
Yeah.
So I think that's where you were going with it. And you were saying, just do this.
That's right. That's exactly right. It's just one foot in front of the other. Don't look too far ahead of you.
Okay. And then have you ever been to someone's collection of your brand? And what's been the biggest collection you've ever seen?
Oh gosh, actually we have a guy, Lance, who works at the distillery as a tour guide. He's not there 5 days a week or anything, but he has a huge collection. I mean, certainly I don't have that big a collection. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I would call my whiskeys a collection, but but it may be Lance. In fact, I must say, shout out to JB's Whiskey House. I mean, that's not necessarily just one individual. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's
a bunch of people.
That's a crazy collection they've got there. But that would be at JB's Whiskey House, and then Lance.
Well, shout out to Lance. We appreciate you bringing in that question, by the way, because that was Lance.
Was that Lance?
That was Lance that asked that question. See, you have no idea the amount of research that I go into this whole thing. You think it's just us coming in and talking.
No way.
No, man. So, okay. So the way that I always wrap these up, not only are we going to see your day in the life, whatever you want us to see, but I always ask 2 questions to end the show realistically. And the first question that I ask always has to do around hate, because we all have to deal with some hate at some times. Now, what are some hate that you've heard, or little troll bandits that said something to you, and how have you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, that is, I will tie this back to one of the things that has been one of the biggest learning experiences for me that I wouldn't trade for anything. Just for one, dealing with people who throw hate out there and perhaps internet trolls. I mean, that's just the reality of the world we're living in. And so at first it hurt a lot. I mean, there were things. So for example, when we first released Belle Meade Bourbon in 2012, we didn't distill it. We still haven't distilled any of it. We used MGP, starting in 2012. And that was a big thing at that time. The conversation in the industry of, or at least within the sort of fans, was, well, you know, some people at the most cynical would say, if you're not distilling, then you're not worth anything. And that got, you know, it was like, well, we're so new to this industry, you know, we don't have like, you know, we're a little green still. And so it's like, if people think that we're not doing this right, like, what do we do? But we had to stick with our, like, what we knew was accurate and true. And that was that we're not distilling this. So like, we have a lot of faith that this is a good product. So if you like it, it shouldn't matter where it came from. And if you don't respect that, like, that's fine, but you know, you don't have to buy our product. So, so just kind of walking through that whole world. I mean, it took years before I was honestly confident enough to say, yeah, we source this, but it's really good, because the other main skill within this industry, there's distilling and there's blending. And we're getting really good at blending, but that kind of got, at least in those days, more short shrift in favor of the idea, if you're not distilling everything, then you're faking it somehow. That was, you know, that was tough, and it hurt. But I ultimately realized, like, we can just be comfortable with ourselves. They're going to say what they're going to say.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're talking about blending, right? We talk about the market here in Nashville now, with so many other brands of, you know, creating bourbons and whiskeys and sourcing whiskeys. And, you know, you have Nashville Barrel Company, Wheeler's Raid, and all these. How do you feel about, you know, having more competition, or if you consider them competition or just consider them friends? I mean, how does it feel to have so much more varieties now?
I truly think it's all really cool. I mean, call me an unorthodox businessman, but like, it's hard for me to consider it all competition, because I know, you know, our product is different, and I focus on what we've got going on. Other people have really cool ideas, cool brands. I mean, it's all valuable, and it's cool because it is raising, you know, whiskey itself is becoming much more popular, you know, and that is just a good thing. I mean, you ask do I consider them friends? Yeah, I just do. I mean, I just interviewed Chris Fletcher from Jack Daniels from my podcast. Like, we're buddies. We talk about our, you know, our kids growing up and stuff like that.
Well, y'all are part of the same council, right?
Yeah, Tennessee Distillers Guild. And so we get along really well. And I don't, you know, it's not like he gives me tips and tricks and things.
It's not like a gang, right? It's not like a gang war.
Not at all. We leave that to like the sales folks on the liquor store shelves. Now that's a different world, but like among sort of the brand owners and or the distillers and production staff in particular, very fraternal kind of industry. Everybody helps each other out.
Because it has to be.
Yeah. Or what? No, it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't?
It doesn't. I mean, we've had a distillery, you know, Corsair Distillery down the street from us. One time they had their mill broke or something. They asked if they could come mill some grain. We said, yeah, sure. Like, no problem. We're down the street. Of course, like, we didn't have to say, you know, yes. We could have said, no, you're a competitor. Get away from me. I'm not going to help you. But that's just not good
Nashville.
To put in the world, you know.
It's not Nashville. It's not where we're raising up to be. And that's one thing I've learned about Nashville. It's such a community.
Yeah. And by the way, they would have done the same for us. I didn't mean to say like we're so great. It's just an example of like that's the industry that we grew up in. And so like, of course, it's like, yeah, come on, we'll help you out.
Absolutely. Okay, so then now I got to ask my last question. And my last question always has to do with this year, 2023. Or actually, I'll ask you two questions. What was one thing that stuck out to you last year that you did last year?
That I did last year? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that would have been 2022. Mm-hmm. My God, my son turned 1 year old. Hey. He was born in 21.
That's awesome.
And I mean, we started this whole build out, you know, the distillery. I mean, that's just massive. I mean, that's the biggest thing going on in our business right now. So
2023, what are you looking forward to, you and the business looking forward to in 2023?
My son's second birthday coming up soon.
Yeah, but also, there you go.
But also finishing the build out and being able to welcome people into the distillery, into the bar, restaurant, you know, see the tours of the new distilling, you know, floor. Just can't wait for that. I mean, I have, you know, bigger office space, which is like so lame to anybody listening, but to me, it's like very, very exciting.
Man, tell me about it. And now, that's what's amazing is like we're having this conversation today, and it's going to be, everyone's going to tune in to see your facility and see how amazing it is. And if anything, you're going to get a lot of press from it, and it's going to be so cool because I love the fact that I have the content before the content actually starts being put out. Yeah. And I love it, man. So, okay. So the way that we do this, we always do a show here called Walk the Line. That's where I go behind the scenes and see what you do. It could be anything. You could show me your awesome new office if you want to, or we could see a little bit of the tour, or you could show me something else. But the way that we tee it up here is you look straight into that camera, you say your name, your organization, and then you say, now this is how I walk the line. Just like Johnny Cash. So say, this is how I walk the line. And then before you know it, magic, fairy dust, we go to that part of the show.
Cool.
You ready to roll?
Yeah.
All right. After this applause, in 3.
I'm Andy Nelson with Nelson's Brier Distillery, and this is how I walk the line.
Hey, Andy.
Well, welcome here to Nelson's Brier Distillery. This is where we're going to be walking in the front door. As you can see, we've got a beautiful 32-seat bar behind me, 100-seat restaurant over here. We're just in the opening stages, so we're working on, getting everything all set up for everybody to come on in here on day one. Behind this big old plate glass window, you'll see these giant steel containers. Those are our fermenters. So you're looking at our production floor right back behind me here, and our still Miss Louisa right over there. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. We've been working on this since, it's probably been 6 months, probably about 6 months for the physical, construction and stuff. So this used to be, space where we're standing right now used to be probably one part of the front office. No, you know what? This is exactly where our loading dock actually was, right where we are. So it's kind of crazy to think that, but now here we are in our beautiful bar and restaurant. So this is our hallway of history where the full proper tour starts. So we're starting chronologically, beginning really in 1835 with Charles Nelson, my triple great grandfather Charles Nelson, the year he was born, and his journey from Germany to America and on down the way up until the modern day. So that's on one side of the hall. On the other side, we have a timeline like you might see in a textbook that just goes through a lot of big kind of cultural touch points in the world, right next to the big moments in our company and my family history, showing you kind of what else was happening in the world to give you a little bit of context surrounding the story of Charles Nelson and Louisa Nelson and their journey from Germany to America to Brier Distillery. These are, at least on the right and the left, 2 original bottles of Brier Tennessee whiskey with the name Charles Nelson on it. And so these bottles are over 150 years old, be up to 160 years old. These are original bottles, and these bottles right here are the things that made us realize and know that, hey, this is the business we have to be in. We've got to get going on this. And so these are definitely my 2 favorite things in this room. It is, history is the forefront of everything because it is the reason that our business even exists, in the modern day, because, my brother and I were not, he hadn't even graduated college yet. I was just a year out of college. I didn't know fully what I was going to do. I didn't have career plans. And so we learned about this history and just became enamored immediately and had this instant passion for it. And so we knew this is what we're going to do. So we entered this business, this industry, from the this historical angle. And so it's been a big thing for me to kind of know that just because I didn't come from a science background, for example, it doesn't make my, being in this industry or this business any, less than someone who, you know, is a great scientist and knows how to chemically make everything perfectly, or that kind of a thing. So, but yeah, it's cool. It's just a different value, and it's all worth the same in the end. So I don't know if you noticed, when we first walked in, this is the view you could see through these giant windows out here. So if you look to my left, your right, these giant plate glass windows. And if you notice, that's where you walked in when you first entered the building. So you come look right at where we're standing now, and this is it. This is an amazing view. For me, I mean, you guys have maybe never seen this, but for me to see it from where it came from, it's unbelievable. You know, we've worked so long and so hard to get this to where it is now, and to have this view finally in sight, you know, to see it on paper is one thing and know what it's gonna look like, but to see it in person is an entirely different thing. So what you see behind me here is Miss Louisa. This is our 750-gallon copper pot and column hybrid still, and this is what does all the hard work here in this distillery. So we take our beer from the fermenters, like I told you before, this alcoholic porridge kind of a thing. It's at about 9, 10, 11% alcohol by volume. And we put it into the pot here in Miss Louisa. And what we do then is we heat it up, and what's happening there is the distillation process. This is really something, you know, you probably learned in the 7th grade. This is just the separation of alcohol from the other, you know, from the water mostly. And that is based on the principle that water has a higher boiling point than alcohol. In other words, when you're heating it up, the alcohol boils off first, turns to vapor, and rises up the column of that still. The next part of it goes through this silver kind of S-curve pipe and into that pencil-shaped looking vessel right there. That's the condenser. And what's happening there is there are these series of shotgun tubes running through that with cold water running through them. So that just creates a colder atmosphere. So when that hot vapor, that's the alcohol vapor, hits the cold air in the condenser, it cools down, condenses into a liquid, and comes out of that little tray, that kind of glass cage we call a parrot, as whiskey. That's our whiskey off the still. And the next process is part of our, specifically our Tennessee whiskey making process, which I'll show you here in a minute. So as you may be able to tell, or maybe not, we're in what is to become our barrel storage warehouse. So because we're right in the middle of moving and moving into it, we don't have any barrels here just yet, but you'll see a big old row of barrels and ricks like that moving forward from here. Very excited for that, to have, you know, barrels just look cool, they feel good, they're beautiful, they're, you know, they just give a cool vibe. So that's part of our business, so we're excited to get them back in. All right, well, that's it for our tour at Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery. I hope you enjoyed it. Please come see us. We're open 7 days a week for lunch, brunch, tours, tastings, anything your heart desires. Bottles, you got it. Come on by anytime. We'd love to have you. We'll see you next time.